Iran just lost its most powerful weapon. Not a missile, not a nuclear warhead, a choke point. 21 miles of water that held the entire global economy hostage for 45 years. And this morning, for the first time in half a century, oil from Iraq's fields reached the Red Sea without passing through it. Stay with me because what just happened changes the Middle East in ways that most people haven't grasped yet. And we update this analysis every single day so you don't miss what comes next. Think about what the Strait of Hormuz actually meant. 20% of the world's entire oil supply squeezed through a bottleneck barely wider than a city. On one side, Iran, a regime that spent 4 decades perfecting one threat: close the strait, crash the global economy, make any American president who dared challenge them pay an unbearable political price. It worked. Every time Washington moved toward military action against Iran's nuclear program, the same calculation killed the momentum. Strike Iran, Iran closes the strait. Strait closes, oil goes to $200 a barrel. Oil at $200, the world enters recession. Recession, the president who authorized the strike gets destroyed politically. That chain, from decision to political ruin, was Iran's real nuclear deterrent. Not enriched uranium, a shipping lane. If you've never seen this framing before, drop a comment below right now, because most of the world hasn't. While carrier groups maneuvered and missiles flew and the world watched the spectacle of conflict, something quieter and far more consequential was being built in the desert. A 1,300-kilometer pipeline. Iraq's southern oil fields, the second largest proven reserves in OPEC, the supergiant Rumaila field, the West Qurna complex. All of it now connected west through Saudi Arabia's eastern desert, past Riyadh, past the Hejaz Mountains to the Red Sea coast at Yanbu. This morning, that pipeline carried its first operational flow. That sentence deserves a moment. Iraqi oil reached international export markets without touching the Strait of Hormuz. Here's where it gets even more important, and this is the piece the mainstream coverage keeps missing. The bypass isn't just one pipeline, it's a system. Saudi Arabia's existing east-west Petroline already had capacity for roughly 5 million barrels per day. The new Iraq-Saudi crossing adds another 3 to 4 million. The UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, running to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, south of the strait, adds another 1.5 million at expanded utilization. Added up, nearly 10 million barrels per day now have an alternative route that completely avoids the waterway Iran has held over the world's head. That is close to 50% of current strait throughput. If this is the first time you're hearing about this architecture, share this video, because this is the story behind the story that changes everything. Now apply those numbers to Iran's threat. In the old world, Iran closes the strait, disrupts 100% of throughput, oil spikes to $200, global recession, the American president is politically finished. In the new world, Iran closes the strait, 50% of throughput reroutes through the bypass, oil spikes to around $140. A serious shock, but not a civilization-level catastrophe. The difference between $200 oil and $140 oil isn't just a number. It's the difference between politically unsurvivable and politically manageable. It's the difference between a weapon that freezes decision-makers and a weapon that can be absorbed. That gap, $60 per barrel of strategic leverage, is what got built in the desert while no one was paying attention. And here is what Iran knew and couldn't stop. Iranian intelligence tracked this project for years. Iran's aligned factions in the Iraqi parliament opposed it at every stage. Iran threatened to cut the natural gas it supplies to Iraqi power plants if approval moved forward. And it's real leverage because Iraq depends on Iranian gas for electricity. Iran-linked militias signaled that infrastructure serving Saudi and American interests would face operational risk. None of it stopped the build. The oil price dropped $17 per barrel within 4 hours of the pipeline's activation being confirmed by trading desks. Not because the strait threat disappeared, because the worst-case scenario was repriced. Before the pipeline, worst case meant $200 oil and a global recession. After the pipeline, worst case means $140 oil and a painful but manageable disruption. Markets priced that gap immediately. Every additional day the pipeline flows without disruption, the risk premium compresses further. Iran's leverage isn't being destroyed in a single dramatic moment. It's being drained barrel by barrel through an alternative route. Here's what makes this geopolitically explosive beyond the energy economics. Iraq built this pipeline. Let that land. Iraq, whose government contains significant Iranian-aligned political factions, whose power sector depends on Iranian gas, whose security forces include Iran-backed militia units, whose economy is deeply intertwined with Iranian commercial networks, that Iraq agreed to a cross-border pipeline to Saudi Arabia that directly reduces Iran's most important strategic tool. 2 years ago, this would have been considered impossible. The Iranian project for Iraq wasn't just about military influence. It was about making Iraq economically dependent enough that it would never act against Iranian strategic interests. The pipeline says that project failed. Iraq looked at the bypass and calculated that its own national economic interests mattered more than Iranian approval. That calculation, made by a government with real Iranian entanglement, is the most significant political signal in the region in years. And the bypass isn't finished expanding. Phase 2 is already under construction. Engineering assessments indicate the Iraq-Saudi connection can be expanded from 3 to 4 million barrels per day to 6 to 8 million within 18 months. Combined with expanded Saudi Petroline capacity and maximized UAE throughput, total bypass capability could reach 12 to 15 million barrels per day within 2 years. At that level, a full strait closure produces a net disruption of somewhere between 2 and 9 million barrels per day, depending on conditions. 2 to 9 million barrels per day is a significant supply event. It is not the civilization-level catastrophe that made Iran's threat undeniable for 4.5 decades. At that bypass capacity, the Hormuz Trap is functionally neutralized. Not damaged, not reduced, neutralized. The word that Iran's strategic planners have spent 45 years making unthinkable is now a 2-year construction schedule away from being accurate. There is one piece that makes this more complete than the pipeline headline suggests, and almost nobody is reporting on it. Oman controls the southern shore of the strait, not Iran, not the United States. Oman has been the back channel between Washington and Tehran throughout the entire confrontation, the intermediary whose relationships with both sides kept communication alive when direct contact was impossible. Oman is also quietly expanding its own port and pipeline infrastructure on the Gulf of Oman coast. Infrastructure that doesn't require straight access. Infrastructure that positions Oman as a potential additional transit point for oil that needs to bypass the strait. The architecture of the bypass is more layered than any single headline captures. Oman, the UAE, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, all of them building, expanding, and integrating routes that reduce their dependence on 21 miles of water that one hostile government has held as a gun to the world's head. Pull back and look at Iran's complete strategic position right now. The nuclear program is under the most sustained military pressure in its history. The tunnel-based coastal missile systems that provided cover for strait harassment have been degraded. The IRGC Naval Command's infrastructure has been struck. The proxy network's most capable arm, Hezbollah, has been significantly depleted. And now the economic weapon, the Hormuz threat, is being structurally dismantled by bypass infrastructure that no military campaign or diplomatic pressure ever achieved. Iran tried to stop this pipeline through politics, through economic threats, through proxy signaling. It failed on every front. And the Iranian government communications being monitored right now don't read like the communications of an institution with a plan. They read like the communications of an institution watching something happen that it spent years trying to prevent and could not. That pressure isn't only external. The bypass reduces Iranian oil export revenues indirectly by weakening Iran's negotiating position on every front simultaneously. It reduces the economic tool Iran uses to fund the subsidies and patronage networks that hold the regime together internally. At exactly the moment the regime is spending more on military confrontation than its diminished revenue base can comfortably sustain. A regime under external military pressure and internal economic pressure, facing an 88 million person population that is young, educated, connected to the outside world through every workaround technology allows, and periodically erupting in public protest, that is a regime whose strategic position is not just weakened, it is deteriorating across every dimension at the same time. You cannot resist infrastructure. You cannot endure an alternative route. You cannot survive being bypassed by the very mechanism you spent half a century using to control the people around you. Iran built its entire strategic identity around one geographic fact. This morning, that fact got a competitor. We track this story every single day, and the next development in this pipeline system is going to matter as much as the first flow. If you want to understand what comes next before everyone else does, drop your prediction in the comments, hit the like button so this analysis reaches people who need to see it, and subscribe. Every day we publish, we go one layer deeper than the headline. You've just seen what that looks like.